Hello, everybody from Riga Security Conference. I'm Shota Gvineria from the Baltic Defense College, and I'm here with Aleksandra Kuczynska-Zonik from Institute of Central Europe. And we will be talking about the role of China in the European Union area and specifically in the Baltic region. So we will try to unfold a little bit of what China is doing here and why, what are their interests, and what are the tools they're using to achieve their interests. So without further delay, let me ask you a first question. From the Baltic perspective, it is obvious that there are two main threat actors that are operating here in the region. And these two threat actors are Russia and China. And these are two very different types of actors that pose different sort of threat, and they use different tools for achieving their objectives related to increasing their influences in the region. So what is your take on that? So what are the differences, what are the similarities of the footprints that Russians and Chinese are trying to live here? What are the objectives that both of them are trying to achieve in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this interesting question. Indeed, it is Russia which is perceived by the Baltic states as the most important, more significant threat for a long time because of history, because of several different questions. But now we have been observing increasing role of China in the region. And the Baltic states start to perceive China as a threat, as a challenge or risk as well. We have to remember that it is a new situation, a new security situation, because the Baltic states, state institutions start to recognize China as a security risk a few years ago. When we turn back to a few years before, we can mention that there was quite a good relation between the Baltics and China in terms of transport, transit, or economy relation. Mm-hmm. Even we can say that the Baltic states were open and they expressed their willingness to intensify and even deepen their economic relation with China. But indeed, now the situation is quite different. But as I said before, it is Russia, which is the most important issue. But what is, I would say, what is the most challenging, which can be the most significant, is the cooperation between China and Russia.
Okay, so you think that Russia and China might have some common interests in the region and they can cooperate in some sort of cooperation initiatives for achieving their overarching objectives together?
Mm-hmm. In some cases, yes. First of all, it is not a strategic partnership between China and Russia. However, we can find some similar perspectives, similar interests between Russia and China. First, it is a military field, and we know that Russia and China cooperate and even took part in some military activities in the Baltics region so far. So I would say that military cooperation, sectoral cooperation, would be very dangerous for the Baltics region in general. But it is not my intention to express that it would be long-term cooperation, but we don't know how the situation could look like in the future.
Do you already see any signs of military cooperation between China and Russia in the region?
As I said, there was some military exercise in which took part groups from Russia and China together. But it is not very frequent. However, we have to keep mind on that.
Yeah, Aleksandra, a few minutes ago you mentioned that the perception in the Baltic region about China has shifted at some point, and before the region was more open to the cooperation opportunities, but then the countries of the region started to increasingly see China as a threat. Can you tell me when exactly this shift happened and why? What made the Baltic states and the countries of the region, in a maybe more wider sense, including Poland, realize that actually cooperation with China might include some short-term financial benefits, but it definitely has hidden mines and slow reaction bombs in it, and it is more of a threat than a cooperation opportunity. So what was the trigger, and what was the indication that this kind of cooperation can lead us to a elevated threat in the longer run?
Yet answering this question, we should move back to 2012 when initiative 16+1 initiative was launched. It is an initiative of cooperation between China and Central and Eastern Europe. And the Baltic states, as well as Visegrad countries and some of Balkan states take part. And the aim of this cooperation is to intensify, from perspective of Central and Eastern European states, the aim is to increase their export to China. They wanted to sell their goods, to intensify export, to deepen transport or transit from China. And of course, from perspective of China, it was to open European market to Chinese goods. And 9 years after, it turned out that the initiative is not exactly effective because and particularly the Visegrad countries, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, expressed their dissatisfaction because it turned out that their exports haven't increased significantly, and there are some threats as well. The perspective of the Baltic states is slightly different because at the beginning they
didn't real no. So in the beginning, it sounded like a cooperation opportunity that was bringing benefits to everybody. Then it turned into a threat. At some point, right?
Yeah, but I didn't. The expectation weren't so high that, for example, in the Visegrad countries. So they are quite open and free to cooperate with China. But since 2018 and 19, security institutions start to reveal that there are Chinese espionage in the Baltic states. There are, as I said, military cooperation between Russia and China. There is some question connected with Chinese values and norms, or even controversial cooperation between universities. For example, between Estonian universities and in China.
Okay, very good. So this is the focus of more Central and Eastern Europe. But let's zoom out a little bit and look at the entire European Union. So do you see any signs of unified policy on China within the European Union? Or there are still too many divisions within and the shift in perceptions as well as expectations in different countries of the European Union is still quite different. And it's not clear at this point where European Union's policy on China might lead. It's still brewing, it's taking shape, and what do you make out of it? First of all, is the experience from Central and Eastern Europe valuable for the entire European Union while developing the policies on China? And the second, what do you see as the prospects of coming up with the unified policy on China on behalf of the European Union?
Yeah, it's a good question and very complex because on the one hand, there are several fields of cooperation between European Union and China. We've got global governance, similar perspective towards Iran and North Korea's nuclear policy, climate change, and so on. There's, of course, economic cooperation because European Union and China are each other's the largest economic trade market. But it is not, we have to remember that it is not once more, strategic partnership, but rather rivalry. China has got several interests in South Africa, for example, in Latin America, where European Union wants to intensify its influence as well. Taking into account fields of where where China and European Union are divided, we can mention human rights and democracy, but they are infrastructure project, Belt and Road Initiative, or several infrastructure projects, and of course Chinese technology, which is also recognized as a threat to some extent.
Very good. Yeah, so I think this leads us perfectly to the next question I wanted to ask about overall influences, foreign malign influences of China in Europe or in the European Union countries. And one of the key tools that China is using for increasing its influences is information ecosystem. And we're sitting with these face masks here and having this conversation, so I guess we cannot avoid the topic of COVID as well.
Yeah.
And how did this pandemic affect information ecosystem in general, and in particular the possibilities of the authoritarian regimes such as China to influence some decision-making processes or public opinion within the European Union countries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would start from my own experience. I would that we are generally accustomed to talking about influence in context of Russia. Information influence in context of Russia. To some extent, we can compare information policy between, information policy of Russia and China, especially when we are talking about the aim. I would say that the general aim is the same or very similar, to increase positive image of the country or to influence in several different ways, to increase, to share values, norms of Chinese authority, and to intensify relation between China and different actors. But on the other hand, I would say that Chinese is quite Chinese information policy is differs from Russia because so far Russia hasn't used so many fake news, disinformation, misinformation than Russia used to do. However, pandemic, in my opinion, has changed everything. Russia has intensified its information policy, and we can. Everyone probably knows Chinese mask diplomacy, when China has used mask as a visual tool for increasing its positive image in Europe or in the world.
Thank you for that. And probably one of the most important things when it comes to Chinese influence would still be its investments in strategic assets and critical infrastructure. So that's the main outline of the Chinese threat if we compare it with Russia, because Russia is using always more coercion and more hard security tools to achieve the objectives, but Chinese are coming with the different tools. They have more money. They can invest in some strategic assets in Europe, and then they can use the strategic assets as the policy tools and tools for pressure on different governments and different vulnerable groups within the country. So well, how do you see this threat changing or evolving, and how do you see the perception of the threat from the sides of the governments and the societies developing in this unusual times where we live now?
Once more, it's a very big question. In my opinion, the most the risky situation is that we don't know the consequences of this influence, because on the one hand, societies and to some extent state authorities are interested in Chinese investment, Chinese loans, infrastructure projects, but on the other hand, we don't know what is the long-term effect of this Chinese influence. And I would say it is the most important and even global issue. There was a discussion in context of Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel. Because it was a Chinese company which was to build this project, but after the hot discussion, the project was cancelled. And I think that it is a very difficult problem how to deal with Russia investment, because and it is the problem of whole European Union, because on the one hand, it is members of European Union want to intensify this economic cooperation, but there is also democratic values on the other hand, and it is very difficult to separate economy from politics, from democracy, and it is a great problem for us, for all European Union.
So yeah, this is exactly the problem, that the authoritarian regimes are increasingly able to find more non-military and non-coercive tools, maybe non-kinetic tools, to find their influences and increase their influences in the region without being noticed as doing something visible, such as the military pressure, for example. And this, of course, in the first place concerns China more than Russia, because Russia's opportunities of influencing through non-military means is quite limited.
Yeah,
Is that a fair sum up of our conversation, you think?
Yeah, I would say it's perfectly mean what I also would like to say.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your time,
Great.
Aleksandra, and
Thank you.
thank you very much for your thoughtful comment.
Oh, thank you very much.